Friendship costs freedom. When I risked my life to help my best friend escape her abusive husband, she betrayed me and sold me out to the police in exchange for immunity for herself, leaving me facing human trafficking charges. I worked in Phoenix, Arizona as a high-level logistics coordinator, a fancy title for someone who knows how to move complicated things quickly and quietly across long distances. This specialized knowledge was usually applied to freight and supply chains, but tonight it was being applied to a friend. Maya and I had been best friends since college. She was bright, magnetic, and beautiful. She was also trapped in a terrifying marriage with Victor, a successful, charming entrepreneur who behind closed doors was a violent, paranoid control freak. For months, I had been building the escape plan. Victor wasn't just abusive, he was connected. He had eyes and ears everywhere, and he had made it clear to Maya that if she ever left, he would destroy her life and mine. If you ever try to leave Maya, I will make sure the one person you care about the most suffers a consequence so severe you'll beg me to take you back, he had told her. Tonight was the night. Victor was out of town at a supposed business conference. At 2:00 a.m., I drove my rented, nondescript SUV I'd purchased just for this job to the back alley behind Maya's sprawling Scottsdale home. I parked silently, killed the engine, and sent the prearranged code word sunrise. Maya slid into the passenger seat 2 minutes later, wearing dark clothing and carrying only a small backpack. Her face was pale, streaked with tears, and she was shaking uncontrollably. "Elias," she whispered, clutching my arm. "We have to go. Victor's flight was delayed. He's coming back early." My mind raced. Early? How early? He texted his assistant 20 minutes ago. His plane lands at Sky Harbor at 3:00 a.m. He'll be home by 3:30 a.m. Panic clawed at my throat. My meticulously planned escape route, a slow multi-state drive leading to a hidden apartment in Idaho, was now too risky. Victor would track my personal cell phone, my credit cards, and every logical route. Plan B, I said, putting the car in gear. Forget the drive. We're going north, but we're going through a different channel. I drove the SUV 40 minutes north to a remote, privately owned airfield outside of Flagstaff. I had spent 2 weeks quietly arranging the final piece of the escape, a single-engine private plane piloted by an old logistics contact, Rory, who owed me a massive favor. Rory was going to fly Maya to a small town in rural Montana where she could disappear off the grid. We reached the small airstrip at 3:15 a.m. Rory was waiting, his small plane idling quietly on the cracked tarmac. "Rory, change of plans. Victor's due, back in an hour," I said, handing him an envelope thick with cash, more than half my savings. "You need to take off now." Rory nodded, understanding the stakes. Maya and I embraced tightly. "Thank you," she choked out, holding me so tight I could barely breathe. "You saved my life, Elias. I'll never forget this." "Go," I urged her, pushing her toward the plane. "Don't look back. Don't call me. Just be safe." I watched the plane taxi, turn and lift into the pitch-black sky. I waited until the sound faded completely, ensuring Maya was truly free. Then I turned my attention to covering my tracks. I drove the rented SUV to an airport overflow lot, pulled the temporary license plates I had affixed to the car, and tossed them into a storm drain. I changed clothes in the carmy dark running clothes for normal street attire, and began the long, quiet walk back toward a main road to call a cab. As I walked, 2 unmarked police cruisers swerved to a halt right beside me. Their headlights blinded me. "Elias Vance," a stern voice demanded. "Yes, you are under arrest." Before I could ask why, they slammed me against the hood of the car, roughly cuffing my hands behind my back. "On what charge?" I demanded, panic rising. "Felony human trafficking," the officer stated coldly. "We have a full statement and evidence of an illegal border crossing and transporting a victim across state lines. Your friend Maya Peterson just turned herself in and implicated you. She's been granted full immunity." My world dissolved. The cold metal of the handcuffs was nothing compared to the shock. The person I risked everything for, me best friend, had sold me out to save herself. The shock of the arrest was a physical blow. As I was driven back to Phoenix, the reality of the charge, felony human trafficking, was sickening. It wasn't just a charge, it was a career killer, a life sentence, and a grotesque distortion of my heroic intentions. I was taken to the station and immediately placed in a small, cold interrogation room. My handcuffs were replaced by the chilling weight of isolation. An hour later, Detective Ruiz, a stern woman with an unreadable expression, slid a file across the steel table. Elias Vance, we know everything, she stated, her voice flat. We have a full sworn affidavit from the victim, Maya Peterson. She claims you kidnapped her, pressured her into leaving the state, and facilitated her illegal transport across state lines using cash and intimidation. That is an absolute vicious lie, I hissed, leaning forward. Maya is my best friend. I risked my career and my savings to help her escape her abusive husband, Victor, as the monster. Ruiz opened the file and pulled out a photograph, a color print of Maya. She looked clean, composed, and terribly fragile. Maya tells a different story. She states that Victor's abuse was a necessary fiction you convinced her to fabricate so she would leave him. She claims you were romantically obsessed with her and that you manipulated her into thinking her life was in danger so you could isolate her from her husband and take her to Montana. My blood ran cold. The sheer audacity of the lie was stunning. Maya had flipped the script entirely, painting me as the delusional, dangerous orchestrator and herself as the manipulated victim. She's lying to save herself, I pleaded. Victor is connected. He must have pressured her. Did you check her for bruises? Did you check the police reports? I know Victor has suppressed. Detective Ruiz didn't flinch. We have not located Victor yet, but Maya provided a detailed timeline. She specifically implicated you in the financial transactions and the use of the unregistered aircraft. She provided text messages where you discussed disappearing and going dark. She has been granted full immunity in exchange for her testimony and cooperation. I realized the trap. Maya hadn't just turned herself in, she had engineered the entire narrative to eliminate the only witness to her escape, me, and placate her husband or whoever was pulling the strings. She used my specialized knowledge of logistics against me. She sold me out to Victor. I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. She sold me out to Victor. We believe you were running a side operation. Ruiz continued, pressing the advantage. The payment to the pilot Rory Sanchez was excessive. We believe you were paid a substantial sum to move Maya for reasons related to her husband's business interests. I felt the walls closing in. The police weren't interested in the truth of abuse. They had a neat, clean story of an obsessed trafficker, complete with a cooperating victim. I finally managed to contact a public defender, a tired, overworked man named Mr. Chin, who arrived hours later. I quickly explained the truth, Victor's control. The escape plan, the last-minute change to the plane, but he only shook his head grimly. Elias, the fact that you used an unregistered flight, paid an exorbitant amount of cash to the pilot, and had no legal ties to Maya makes this look textbook. Your friend Maya is now the state's star witness, and she's claiming you're the predator. Your logistics background only makes the planning look more sinister. What about Victor? I demanded. He's the key. Victor Peterson has mysteriously vanished. Mr. Chen stated, his eyes scanning the police documents. Which ironically makes your case look worse. It implies you successfully removed the obstacle. We need bail and fast, but the judge for human trafficking cases won't be lenient. As Mr. Chen left to fight for my bail, I was led to a holding cell. I sat on the cold bench, utterly alone, with a single devastating thought cycling through my mind. I had risked everything, my freedom, my future, my savings, for a friendship that was a lie, and now I was facing decades in prison because my best friend had chosen freedom over loyalty. My only hope lay in disproving Maya's entire narrative and somehow finding Victor before he disappeared completely. The arraignment was a disaster. The prosecution used the human trafficking charge, the unregistered flight, the large cash payment to the pilot, and Maya's sworn testimony to paint me as a dangerous flight risk criminal. The judge denied bail, citing the severity of the charges, and the flight risk especially since I was a logistics expert. We will appeal immediately, Mr. Chen, my public defender, promised, but he looked deeply pessimistic. I was transferred to the county jail, where I spent 3 days in a terrifying limbo. My phone was confiscated and my life was on pause. My entire professional identity, built on precision and trust, was inverted into evidence of criminal planning. Then, unexpectedly, my bail was posted. I was released late on the third night. The bail amount was astronomical, far beyond what I or my parents could afford. I signed the release papers, walking out of the fluorescent nightmare and into the cool Arizona night, utterly confused. A sleek black sedan was parked across the street. As I approached, the window rolled down. Behind the wheel was Victor Peterson. I froze, adrenaline flooding my system. This man, the architect of Maya's abuse, and the potential beneficiary of my downfall was the one who paid for my release. Get in, Elias, Victor said, his voice low, measured, and dangerously calm. We need to talk about my wife and your freedom. I hesitated, but I knew running would only validate the charges. I got into the back seat. Let me be clear. Victor began, driving away slowly. I didn't pay $500,000 for your bond out of the kindness of my heart. I paid it because you're the only person who knows where Maya is and the only person who can undo the mess she made. The mess she made, I scoffed. She's claiming I kidnapped her. She sold me out to the police. Victor chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Maya has always been excellent at self-preservation. She knew the only way out of my grasp was to give the authorities an equally compelling narrative to justify her disappearance. You, Elias, with your expertise in moving assets and your close relationship with her, were the most convenient fall guy. Why would you bail me out if I'm convicted? You never have to worry about Maya again, I challenged him. Because the police now believe Maya is a victim of human trafficking. This is a high-profile case. They will spend months trying to find her, and if they do, they will seize everything I own under anti-trafficking laws. Victor explained, his eyes stone cold. She didn't just escape. She blew up my entire financial infrastructure to guarantee her safety. She's trying to destroy me. He pulled over to a dark, isolated street. Here's the deal. You are charged with a serious felony. I can guarantee two things. First, my lawyers, who are excellent, will testify that Maya has a history of severe mental instability and that she has confessed to manipulating you. This will undermine her credibility and lead to the charges against you being dropped. And the second thing, Victor smiled, a predatory expression that chilled me to the bone. You must tell me where she is. You give me Maya, and I will give you your life back. I will make sure the pilot Rory disappears and your name is cleared. You walk away with a clean record. I stared out the window, processing the brutal calculus. My best friend had betrayed me, creating a legal nightmare. Her abusive husband, Victor, now held the key to my freedom. He wasn't offering salvation. He was demanding the ultimate price for my defense, Maya's location. I don't know where she is. I lied easily. I put her on a plane, but the destination was only known to the pilot, who I paid to disappear. Victor sighed, disappointment flickering across his face. I thought you were smarter than that, Elias. You have 72 hours. Find her, or I let the prosecution run its course. And believe me, without my defense, you will spend the rest of your life in federal prison. He dropped me off blocks away from my empty apartment. I was free, but I was now an active player in Victor's horrifying game. I had 72 hours to choose between saving my own life by betraying Maya or risking decades in prison to protect the person who had knowingly thrown me to the wolves. Victor's threat, 70 hours to choose between my freedom and Maya's safety, was a suffocating pressure. I knew he wasn't bluffing. His resources were limitless, and his motive was clear: survival. Maya had filed a lawsuit against him using the only tool she had, the high-profile, federally enforced narrative of human trafficking, and he had to neutralize it before the government seized his assets. I didn't waste time looking for Maya. I had lied to Victor. The truth was, I didn't know her precise location, but I knew the methodology. Rory the pilot was the key. My first act was contacting Rory Sanchez. I used an encrypted burner phone I still kept from my logistics days, calling the specific satellite phone number he only used for black market jobs. Rory, it's Elias. You need to tell me exactly where you dropped Maya. I ordered, my voice low and urgent. Rory sounded terrified. Elias, I can't. That wasn't part of the deal. I was paid to disappear. If Victor finds out I talked, he'll kill me. Victor already knows about the plane, Rory. The cops have your name and the flight logs from the airfield. They know you were paid a massive cash sum, and they are classifying this as human trafficking. Victor is under federal investigation because of it. If you don't cooperate with me, the FBI will trace every flight you've ever taken. I applied pressure where I knew it hurt professionalism and legality. Rory, a good pilot caught in a bad situation, finally cracked. Okay. I dropped her in Dillon, Montana. She had an address, a rental cabin paid for in cash months ago. I promised her I'd burn the GPS data. Dillon, Montana, a small remote town near the Idaho border, the perfect place to hide. I now had the information Victor demanded, but my moral compass slammed against the choice. Giving Maya back to Victor was a death sentence, no matter what legal guarantees he offered me. He would destroy her slowly, completely. I had to protect Maya, but I also had to prove Victor was the orchestrator of my frame-up. The search for the pilot. I needed undeniable evidence that Victor was involved in the conspiracy to frame me. The best place to start was the pilot who had been paid by both of us. I tracked Rory down to his hideout in rural Nevada. I didn't tell him I knew Maya's location. I only focused on Victor. I met Rory in a dingy motel room. He was a wreck, fearing both the police and Victor. "When did Victor contact you, Rory?" I asked. "2 days after I dropped Maya," he whispered. "He called asking if I'd take a large cash payment to fly a package to the Caymans. I refused. Then he offered me $50,000 to sign an affidavit saying I thought you were running an illegal smuggling operation and that you threatened me to fly the plane. Did you sign it?" Rory nodded miserably. I was scared. He had pictures of my kids. He had a whole file on me. I pulled out my own burner phone and started a video recording. "Rory, you need to tell me everything again. But this time you need to state that you were coerced by Victor Peterson, that he offered you $50,000, and that you lied under duress to the police to protect yourself." Rory, facing the threat of federal charges for conspiracy and perjury, realized his only path to safety was full cooperation. He recorded a detailed, tearful confession implicating Victor as the one who provided the affidavit and the money, and outlining the threats against his family. The decision. The 72 hours were ticking down. I had 2 documents, the location of the person who had betrayed me, and a video confession from the pilot who had confirmed Victor's conspiracy against me. I drove back to Phoenix, my mind racing. Victor was expecting a phone call telling him where to find his wife. If I gave him the location, my human trafficking charge would evaporate. If I didn't, I faced life in prison. I pulled over by a payphone, an antiquated, untraceable means of communication. I had 15 minutes before the deadline expired. I dialed Detective Ruiz at the police department. I told her I had the proof that the prosecution's star witness Maya Peterson and her husband Victor were engaged in a massive criminal conspiracy to frame an innocent man. "Detective, I have the key to solving this case," I said, my voice shaking with certainty. "I have the confession of the pilot Rory Sanchez detailing the $50,000 bribe and the threats from Victor Peterson, and I know exactly where Victor is going to be in the next few hours." I didn't give up Maya. I gave up Victor. I knew that if Victor thought I would betray him, he would move. "He's at the Sky Harbor executive hangar right now, arranging a private jet out of the country. I need protection, and I need you to listen to this confession tape." I had gambled my freedom on the hope that the truth, when presented with overwhelming evidence, would finally dismantle the lie Maya and Victor had built. The clock hit 0. The war was on. I hung up the burner phone and immediately began destroying it, snapping the SIM card and tossing the pieces into different storm drains. I had gambled my life on a desperate play, betraying Victor before he could betray me, and hoping the police would trust a wanted criminal's tip. I drove my rented SUV, now feeling less like a getaway car and more like a tactical vehicle, toward the executive hangars at Sky Harbor Airport. I didn't get far. 2 blocks from the airport, a police cruiser flashed its lights behind me. I pulled over, my hands placed clearly on the steering wheel. Detective Ruiz approached the driver's window, but she wasn't alone. Standing behind her was a massive, expensive lawyer I instantly recognized, Mr. Henderson, Victor Peterson's corporate counsel. Ruiz's expression was grim. "Mr. Vance, Victor Peterson contacted us moments ago. He claims you just called him, threatening his life and demanding an additional $100,000 to keep the location of his wife's secret." My heart sank. Victor had preempted my move. He hadn't rushed to the hangar to flee. He had called the police first, spinning a new lie that positioned him as the threatened victim and me as the desperate blackmailer. "That's a lie, Detective," I stated, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. "I called you. I gave you the location of Victor and the pilot's confession implicating Victor in a conspiracy to frame me. Where is the task force?" Ruiz looked skeptical. "We received the call from Victor first. He claimed you were trying to extort him before you turned him in. We also checked the address you gave for Victor the hangar. Mr. Henderson here confirms Victor is safely at home meeting with his attorneys." Mr. Henderson stepped forward, his suit impeccably tailored. "Detective Mr. Peterson would like to amend the charges against Mr. Vance to include extortion and threats of violence. Mr. Vance's pattern of criminal behavior, including the illegal transport of my client's wife, and now this attempted shakedown, is escalating." My evidence, Rory's confession, was likely still being reviewed by a junior officer buried under layers of bureaucracy. Victor's influence, however, worked instantaneously. They're covering for him, detective, I pleaded. Victor is paying them to lie. I can prove it. Just check the manifest for Victor Peterson's private jet at the executive hangar. He has a flight filed for tonight. Ruiz paused, considering the request. She walked back to her cruiser to run the check. As I waited, Mr. Henderson leaned into my window, his expression cold. You should have taken the deal, Elias. Victor owns this city. He knows you didn't call him threatening money. He knows you called the police. But who do you think they'll believe, the respected businessman or the man charged with human trafficking? Ruiz returned, her face unreadable. There is a manifest. Victor Peterson is listed as a passenger on a private jet, scheduled to depart for the Cayman Islands in 2 hours. A flicker of triumph sparked in my chest. Victor hadn't been fast enough to cancel the official flight plan. That proves I was telling the truth. He was fleeing the country, I exclaimed. It proves he was planning to leave the country, Ruiz corrected, which is what any businessman would do when facing threats and harassment. Mr. Henderson provided Victor's written statement explaining he filed the flight plan because he was terrified of you. I was caught in a perfect legal double trap. Victor had anticipated my move and weaponized it against me. The charges of extortion and threatening a witness were officially added to my human trafficking charge. I was arrested again, this time with a definitive record of bail violation. The stakes were astronomical, and I was going straight back to the county jail, likely without the possibility of bail. A twist of fate. As the officers were escorting me back to the cruiser, a beat-up sedan screeched to a halt at the curb. Out stepped Mr. Chin, my public defender, looking frazzled, followed by an elegant, determined woman I didn't recognize. Detective Ruiz, stop, Mr. Vance's legal team is here. Mr. Chin yelled, waving an envelope. We are filing a writ of habeas corpus based on new evidence. The elegant woman stepped forward. She carried herself with the sharp, ruthless confidence of a seasoned litigator. I am Ms. Avery, a partner at the firm of Hayes, Burton and Lee. I have been retained by Mr. Vance, and I have just filed a motion with the U.S. District Court demanding an emergency hearing concerning the blatant obstruction of justice by Victor Peterson. She looked at Mr. Henderson, a sneer of professional contempt on her face. Mr. Peterson is not just a witness, detective. He is the target of a federal investigation, and his lawyer is knowingly aiding a fugitive. I stared at her. A high-powered corporate law firm, a $500,000 bail jump. Who was this woman, and how had she suddenly appeared to save me from the abyss? The sudden appearance of Ms. Avery, a partner from a prestigious, expensive law firm, shattered the meticulously built legal trap Victor had laid. The moment she declared she was filing a motion in federal court, not state, the dynamic shifted instantly. Detective Ruiz, wary of interfering with federal jurisdiction, reluctantly halted my arrest. Ms. Avery wasted no time. She didn't acknowledge me, focusing entirely on Mr. Henderson, Victor's corporate counsel. Mr. Henderson, Ms. Avery stated, her voice low and cutting, Victor Peterson is a fugitive attempting to obstruct justice. You are currently engaging in witness tampering and aiding his flight. We have filed a motion to have your client detained immediately by federal marshals based on his flight risk. Henderson, recognizing he was outmatched by a superior legal mind operating in a higher court, quickly backed off, pulling Ruiz with him to consult. Ms. Avery then turned to me, her expression finally softening into a controlled seriousness. I'm not cheap, Elias. Let's make that clear. But you didn't pay for me. Who did? I asked, my voice hoarse. My family can't afford this. And the bail, who paid the $500,000? A slow, knowing smile touched her lips. Your bail wasn't paid by Victor, Elias. It was paid by an anonymous fund transferred from Dillon, Montana. My mind flashed Dillon, Montana, Maya's hiding spot. Maya, I whispered. She used her assets, the ones Victor didn't know about, to pay your bail. She knew Victor would contact you, and she knew you'd never betray her location. She's been watching the news, and she knew you were about to be caught in Victor's counter trap. The bitter sting of her betrayal in episode 2 finally mixed with the overwhelming relief of this unexpected loyalty. She had thrown me to the wolves to save herself, but she hadn't left me to die. She was using her last resources to ensure my freedom. And you, Ms. Avery, I asked. Why are you here? I am Maya's divorce attorney. I have been fighting Victor's legal team for a year, preparing for the inevitable divorce. When Maya initiated her escape plan, she wired a substantial retainer to my firm with instructions: if Elias is arrested, retain the best firm in the state and use this money to defend him. The realization hit me: Maya's escape wasn't just physical, it was a scorched earth financial strategy. She had created the human trafficking narrative, not just to confuse the police, but to activate anti-trafficking statutes that allowed the government to freeze Victor's assets, a move a divorce lawyer couldn't legally pull off. She used me as the catalyst, knowing I was the only one capable of executing the precise logistics required. She used me. I concluded, the anger and relief battling inside me. She ensured her survival, Ms. Avery corrected, and in doing so, she gave you the one tool you lacked: legal firepower. Ms. Avery then pulled out a document. I filed the motion. We are using the pilot's confession tape you gave Detective Ruisti, one they were ignoring as evidence of criminal obstruction. The flight manifest proves Victor's intent to flee. We are forcing a federal investigation. She then dropped the final bombshell. Victor has one weakness you don't know about Elias. He didn't just abuse Maya. He was deeply involved in international money laundering for some very dangerous individuals, and those individuals are the real reason he can't afford to be detained. He's desperate. I looked at the Sky Harbor hangar, knowing Victor was likely being whisked away by his lawyers, terrified of the federal motion Ms. Avery had just filed. I was no longer a lone logistics coordinator fighting a local bully. I was a protected target backed by a powerful legal team fighting a massive criminal enterprise. What's the next step? I asked, completely surrendering my fate to Ms. Avery. We go silent. We let the federal agencies do their job. And then she smiled grimly. We sue Victor Peterson for everything he owns. Not for me, or for Maya, but for you. Ms. Avery's intervention had saved me from immediate detention, but the criminal charges, now including extortion and threats, still hung over my head. I was legally free, but emotionally tethered to a high-stakes legal battle that was no longer just about me. Ms. Avery immediately filed the motion in federal court demanding an emergency hearing to review the evidence of obstruction of justice by Victor Peterson. She argued that the local police were compromised and ignoring clear evidence of conspiracy: Rory's confession and the flight manifest, in favor of the influential Victor. The federal response. The gambit paid off. The U.S. District Judge, reviewing the affidavits and the evidence of the aborted flight plan to the Cayman Islands, grew suspicious. The combination of a high-powered logistics expert, me being framed for human trafficking, an abusive husband, Victor, attempting to flee the country, and the evidence of witness bribery suggested a far larger federal case. The judge issued a federal detainer against Victor Peterson, citing him as an extreme flight risk and the target of an active federal investigation into money laundering and wire fraud. The federal marshals were ordered to apprehend him immediately. I received a call from Ms. Avery a few hours later. They got him, Elias. Not for your charges, but for the one thing he couldn't hide: his money. The federal marshals arrested Victor at his corporate headquarters. His assets, including all bank accounts and the private jet, are frozen. The collapse of Victor's power was instantaneous and total. His corporate counsel, Mr. Henderson, immediately withdrew from the case to avoid federal scrutiny, leaving Victor to face the consequences alone. The meeting with Victor neutralized the prosecution's case against me, built entirely on his influence, and Maya's fabricated testimony crumbled. Detective Ruiz, now facing internal review for ignoring my evidence, was forced to release Rory Sanchez, the pilot, and acknowledge his sworn confession. My human trafficking charge was formally downgraded to aiding and abetting an Asian, and my bail was dramatically reduced. The prosecution had lost its power player, and they knew they couldn't win. However, Ms. Avery insisted I needed to face the original source of the chaos, Maya. Maya is the key to clearing your name entirely, Elias, Ms. Avery explained. We need her to recant the human trafficking story and admit she lied under duress. The prosecution will drop the charges if she does. We arranged a secure private meeting in a neutral location in Dillon, Montana, where Maya was still in hiding. I flew there with Ms. Avery, using my own money this time. The cabin was secluded and simple. When Maya opened the door, she looked older, exhausted, but finally free. Elias? She whispered, her voice thick with emotion. You ruined my life, Maya, I said, unable to hide the bitterness. You sold me out to the police and let me face decades in federal prison. And then you paid my bail like it was some kind of atonement. Tears streamed down her face. I know. It was the only way to save us both. Victor told me he would never allow me to escape cleanly. He said if I didn't give the police a plausible villain, he would track me down and kill us both. He said he would plant evidence on you to link you to drug smuggling if I simply disappeared. She pulled out a crumpled, stained notebook. I had to give them a story where they focused entirely on you and the crime so they wouldn't look for Victor. The human trafficking charges activated the federal laws needed to freeze his assets. I used your logistics expertise to create the perfect crime fiction. The full horrifying scope of her plan hit me. It wasn't simple betrayal. It was a complex, desperate sacrifice. She had knowingly thrown me into the fire, but only to ensure the inferno engulfed Victor. I used every dollar I had, Elias. Maya said, her voice shaking. I'm broke, but I won't let you go to prison. I will recant the affidavit. I will tell them I lied. I will take responsibility for the false report. I looked at the woman who had both betrayed and saved me. The choice was clear. I had to accept her loyalty and forgive the terrible cost of her survival, but I still faced a massive legal battle to fully clear my name. I stood facing Maya in the remote Montana cabin, the bitterness of her betrayal still fresh, but the gravity of her sacrifice finally understood. She had created a legal bomb, and I had been the unfortunate delivery mechanism. I have the pilot's confession, Maya. I told her, my voice heavy with a mix of exhaustion and resolve. He confirmed Victor bribed him. We have enough to clear the conspiracy charges, but we need you to recant the human trafficking charge publicly and admit you lied. Maya nodded, accepting the legal consequence of her actions. I will file the recantation affidavit immediately. I will state that I fabricated the kidnapping story to protect myself, knowing it was the only way to trigger the federal investigation needed to stop Victor. The recantation and dismissal. We flew back to Phoenix that afternoon, operating under extreme secrecy. Ms. Avery, my new lawyer, filed Maya's sworn recantation affidavit directly with the U.S. Attorney's Office. The affidavit detailed everything: the psychological and physical abuse, the initial decision to escape Victor's, explicit threats to frame me for drug smuggling, and the calculated decision to create the human trafficking narrative to protect both of us and destroy Victor's financial empire. The result was immediate. The U.S. Attorney's Office, now focused squarely on the far more serious federal charges against Victor, moved to drop the state charges against me. Why pursue a shaky case with a confessed lying witness when they could secure a massive win by indicting the fugitive businessman for wire fraud and money laundering? My public defender, Mr. Chin, looked on in stunned silence as the prosecution formally announced the dismissal of all criminal charges against Elias Vance. I was finally completely free. The civil hammer. My freedom, however, was just the first phase. The second phase, led by Ms. Avery, was about restitution. Ms. Avery filed a massive civil lawsuit against Victor Peterson on my behalf. The charge was malicious prosecution, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress to ED. The damages we sought included legal costs, reimbursing the hundreds of thousands of dollars spent on my defense and bail. 2. Lost wages compensation for the time I was unable to work due to the felony charges. 3. Punitive damages. A hefty sum to punish Victor for his malicious conspiracy and attempt to ruin my life. Maya, meanwhile, proceeded with her divorce, her position now unassailable. Victor was in federal detention, his assets frozen, and his legal standing destroyed by his own criminal conduct. He had no choice but to negotiate. The confrontation. Ms. Avery forced a settlement meeting with Victor's remaining humiliated defense team. I attended the meeting, facing Victor one last time via video conference from the detention center. Victor looked haggard, his expensive suit replaced by a drab uniform. His eyes, once cold and predatory, now held only spite. You win, Elias, Victor sneered through the video feed. You get your money, but you know she chose herself. She didn't protect you. She just needed a diversion. You're a fool. No, Victor, I countered, my voice steady. I was a friend. You were a criminal. Maya and I both risked everything to destroy your control. She won her freedom, and I got my life back, plus the satisfaction of seeing you lose everything you ever stole. The final settlement was decisive. Victor agreed to pay a substantial multi-million-dollar sum to settle both my civil claim and Maya's divorce, all paid out of his remaining frozen assets. It wasn't about the money. It was about the public admission of guilt and the complete financial annihilation of the man who had tried to erase me. I walked out of the law firm that day, My pockets empty, but my name clean, holding a settlement agreement that guaranteed my financial stability and future. I had been betrayed, imprisoned, and nearly ruined, but I had fought back using the one skill I possess, logistics and strategy, and emerged free, vindicated, and wealthier than I had ever been. The cost of friendship had been freedom, but the cost of betrayal had been Victor's life. With the criminal charges dismissed, Victor Peterson detained federally, and his assets frozen, the intense pressure finally lifted. I was a free man, but the emotional scars and the financial cost were deep. I had spent 2 years fighting a war of survival engineered by the two people closest to me, my best friend and her abusive husband. The civil windfall. The multi-million-dollar settlement from Victor's remaining assets finalized through Ms. Avery was deposited into my account. It was a massive sum, easily covering the legal fees, the bail bond, the lost wages, and providing a significant cushion for the future. I had been robbed of my savings, my career, and my peace, but I was now financially stable, entirely, thanks to the criminal I helped put away. My first act was to pay off every debt and restore my savings. My second was to pay Ms. Avery. She earned every penny of her substantial fee. "Elias," she said during our final meeting, "you should consider going back to law school. You have the strategic mind of a litigator, not just a logistician. You were ahead of the U.S. Attorney's Office on this case. You forced the outcome." I just smiled. I didn't need to go back to law school. I had just completed the most rigorous law degree in the country, the trial of survival. The price of immunity. My focus then turned to Maya. She was free, safe, and Victor was imprisoned, but she was now broke. Her decision to use the human trafficking narrative, while strategically brilliant, had cost her everything, including the ability to ever have a normal life. She was hiding in a tiny town in Montana, unable to use credit cards, unable to travel, and facing the social consequences of lying under oath. I flew back to Dillon to see her one last time. The cabin was bleak. She was supporting herself with a remote, low-paying transcription job, living under constant fear that one of Victor's associates might track her down. "Victor is done, Maya," I assured her. "His plea deal means he's facing years in federal prison, and his assets are liquidated. You're safe." "I know," she said, looking away. "But I'm alone, Elias. I burned the bridge with everyone to protect you and myself. I can never go back, and I still have to face the state charges for filing a false police report." I presented her with a document. "The state will likely drop the false reporting charge, especially given the context of domestic abuse. But you need to start over completely." I had established a confidential, irrevocable trust fund in her name. "Victor's settlement paid for my financial recovery," I explained, "but it wouldn't have happened without your courage and your terrible lie. This trust is funded with half of the punitive damages Victor paid me. It's your start-over fund. It's clean money, untraceable, and it's your payment for the price of immunity." Maya stared at the figure on the documenta, life-changing amount, and finally broke down sobbing, not just from relief, but from the weight of all she had done and endured. "I am so sorry, Elias," she choked out. "I thought I lost you forever." "You did," I admitted honestly. "The friendship we had died the moment you signed that affidavit. But I forgive you for choosing survival over loyalty. You did what you had to do." We talked for hours, not as best friends, but as two survivors of a common enemy. I explained my plans for starting a security consulting firm, utilizing my logistics background to help others disappear safely and legally. When the conversation ended, I stood up. This was goodbye. "Go live your life, Maya," I said. "Go be the woman you were before Victor. I won't be in contact. It's better for both of us if we cut ties permanently. Good luck." The new path. I drove away from Dillon, leaving Maya with her secured future. I knew I'd never see her again, and that was the final necessary cost of the betrayal. I returned to Phoenix, no longer the corporate logistician, but the strategic defense consultant. I formally launched Vance Strategic Security, specializing in executive protection and complex logistics, focusing on helping victims of organized crime and domestic violence disappear legally, cleanly, and safely. The betrayal had cost me my past, but it had bought me a powerful future. I was no longer running freight. I was fighting shadows, using the skills Victor and Maya weaponized against me to protect the vulnerable. The cost of friendship had been steep, but the price of my freedom had been paid in full, and I was finally ready to start my true life.